it just blew my mind what the research was showing about the efficacy and the potential of psychedelics. And at that point in time, I was really deep in depression. I think the antidepressants were probably helping a little bit, but I knew that I needed something like more powerful if something was available. I didn't want to go to a therapist. I didn't want to like talk to anybody about psychedelics. I just had read like that, that these have the potential to heal your underlying mental illness as opposed to just, the reduction of symptoms.
Hey, guys, it is Alison. I am the host of your show, Alison Answers Mission Awake. I cannot wait to sit down with you today and go over how we are going to crush the mediocrity in your life that has been plaguing our society since the beginning of time. I cannot wait to have a real deal conversation that includes intelligence, fun, excitement, and real actionable steps to make a real difference in the life that you're living now and making it into something you can be damn proud of and excited to live. Sit down, put on your damn seatbelt, and get ready for the ride of your life.
It's like anything when you see somebody really successful or, somebody goes public with their business or, somebody, whatever, finished, graduates Ranger School. You're like, it's obvious on the other end. You're like, oh man, that guy. Or you could think that person's an overnight success. But what you miss is, like I like the saying, well, it's overnight success, 30 years in the making, yes. 40 years in the making. Yes. And I never feel like a success because I still have to wake up and continuously drive forward. And you got to build the foundation, the building blocks first before you can build up and start refining. But, back to the wax on, wax off kind of thing, right? You really need to get the fundamentals down, what works, what doesn't work, be consistent, be reliable, and lead by example. It's not just like, okay, well, I read a leadership book, so let me just try to apply this stuff like next week. I mean, yeah, that's going to help you, but it's the repetition, and it's the, it's like one time I read Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. I don't know if you've ever read that years ago.
Yes, I love it. Yes,
it's like changed. Like I have a lot of books that I take little bits of my psyche from a lot of places and influences throughout my life. That was a huge influence at a certain time in my life where, there's so many incredible, tips throughout that book. But one that was most important to me to learn was the value of knowing people's names and learning people's names and strategies that, like he says, somebody's name is the most important word in the world to them. Right. So when you hear it, you're like, wow. And the difference between remembering somebody's name and not remembering somebody's name is there's a huge chasm between how you make an individual feel and how you're developing rapport and how that you're developing respect with somebody. So I remember reading that, and I put in a lot of effort to create ways that I could remember people's names and, lock it into my memory. Or, like when I go to a restaurant I go to regularly, like I'll write in the waiter, waitress, names in the chef's names or whatever into like a notes app at this restaurant. I'll look at it in my car before I go in so I can walk in and call people by their name. Yeah. Because, just like little things like that, it's not easy. If I stop trying to do it, like, then I just wouldn't remember people's names. But because I decided that that's something that's really important for me to develop, I practice it. I created, and now it's part of who I am to really understand the role and the meaning of somebody else's name. And, if somebody has an interesting name, ask them about it and they light up and want to tell you about it. You connect with other humans. And the more you kind of ingest these lessons and actually practice them. No, it's not just like, practice it, one time and okay, I understand the concept, so I can do it when no, you gotta put in the practice and the repetition and just keep on doing things so that you can get good at it. So it's not just like I show up one day because they promoted me into a leadership role at a company and I'm all of a sudden a leader.
Right, exactly.
No, there's that book, like, what got you here won't get you there. I don't know if you ever seen
no,
that.
I never did, but I'll read it. Yeah. It's funny. Everything you say is it's wonderful, by the way. And it
Thank
reminds me when we were talking about that 75 hard thing, the 5 critical tasks, one of the things that Andy Frisella also talks about is a power list. And this reminds me of that also, because he's saying that if you have your 5 most important tasks for any given day, and they should be something that you want to create as part of your life. So you doing that, maybe then it just becomes part of who you are. And then you put something else on your critical task list,
hmm
So I
Yeah,
just
you internalize it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool. I have to ask you about this very important thing. We have to discuss. I mean, I don't know. I want to respect your time. Do we need to stop? I want to know about your psychedelics business.
We can keep rolling. Yeah, let's keep.
Is it
Yeah, we haven't even
okay? I
gotten there.
mean, I'll
Yeah, yeah,
break it
yeah.
up and we'll do a psychedelic, but I mean, this is important, but we could
Let's
always
get
do it
there.
again if you need time, if you need to
No,
go.
no, no. I want to. If you got time, we can keep on rolling.
Yeah, I can continue to talk. So could you tell us about your business? And you also mentioned about an endeavor that you're on with your mother that I think it's all related. I believe it is. So
I think everything's related.
oh, that's true. Definitely. Is anything not? Okay. All
No, it
right.
really is. And
Yeah.
I'll paint a picture. My
Mhm.
my company is called the Psychedelic Exchange, or PsycheX for short. I launched it last year, so about 6 or 8 months ago.
Mhm.
And the company's goal and mission is to create access, education, and community around psychedelic-assisted therapy and psychedelic medicine. So what we specifically do is we connect individuals seeking psychedelic support services and psychedelic therapy, or just information, with providers of safe and legal psychedelic therapy. And it started for me with my first exposure to psychedelics, but to get there, I've got to kind of talk about my story about PTSD
Yeah.
and the
Oh,
trauma that
oh,
I
yes, please.
experienced.
Yes.
So when I left the military, it was 2016, and I'd been active duty for 7 years. And I left the military on March 4th of 2016, or that's the date I signed out. And I was had already lined up to my job, my corporate job. I'd already gotten my MBA while I was active duty. So I was, ready to transition. I interviewed for a bunch of companies, picked the company I was going to go work for. Left the Army March 4th. I was supposed to start my new job in May, which I did. And 4 days after I left the military, it was March 8th now, I get a call from a friend saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear about Taylor. I knew you guys were close." And that stopped me dead in my tracks. So Taylor is Taylor Force. He was one of my best friends in the whole world. We actually went to high school together. We went to military boarding school and we're roommates. We went to We applied to West Point together. We went to West Point together, and then we went to Afghanistan together. Even like the last time I saw him was I was flying a helicopter to the station where he was based out of, and we had lunch together and caught up. And then he got out of the Army about 2 years before I did, and was doing his MBA through Vanderbilt, and was on a trip to Israel, actually, of all places. He's a kid from Lubbock, Texas, and you know that I said I was born in Israel. When we were roommates, he used to go to like Passover Seder's with me. He really like appreciated the Jewish faith. It was very novel to him as a kid from like Texas. I think I was one of the first Jews he ever had met. So he really enjoyed, even going to Passover Seder's at West Point together, because we got to drink the 4 glasses of wine, if you're familiar, which we were before we were 21. So, I was like, oh, we get to go drink a little bit. It's legal. But he was even the one of my groomsmen in my wedding. And we doing the saber arch when you get married. He was the main guy leading the saber arch. So one of my just best friends in the whole world. And he was on a spring break like trip with his college, with his university, to study entrepreneurship. And he was in Tel Aviv, walking down the street one night, and was stabbed in a random stabbing attack and died there on the street. After having survived Iraq, he'd already gone to Iraq while I was at flight school, and then he went to Afghanistan. And it wrecked me in that moment. 4 days after getting the military, really excited about moving into my next life. Taylor was one of the guys that I knew like he'd already started walking the path as a civilian, and he was, helping me think through things and everything. And all of a sudden he was just gone. And it was so shocking to my system, so devastated that it really unlocked like everything else in my life to that point that, unlocked my father's suicide and my abandonment from childhood and, war and trauma and, losing friends and getting shot at and getting desensitized to rocket attacks landing around you, like just all of that. And I came out of the military just with like crippling PTSD that really, hit me all of a sudden. And I did a good job keeping it, subsurface and doing the best that I could at, work. I had a really high profile job, like traveling all around the world and, managing, some technology operations. Like I used to, travel to like, I don't know, 30 different countries during that time, just doing a lot of international work. But at the same time, I was drinking probably more than I should. I was not getting along with my wife at all. I carried this really bad energy in me, and I didn't recognize it as depression. And I refused to go to a therapist because I associated therapy to that point with something being wrong with me because my parents kept sending me to therapy as a kid and kind of insinuating that there was something wrong with me. And my mom would compare me to my father and, make me feel like I had these traits in me that were genetic and there was something deeply wrong with me as a result. And so I refused to get help. Like everything else, I thought I was mentally tough and I could just, just force my way through any situation. And so over the course of the next few years, like things kind of got worse and worse for me. And eventually I left my job and I moved with my wife to New Jersey for her job, actually. And I was having this is just like a change we needed to make to see if we can shake things up and, change the direct. We got married when we were 21. So I'd been married for almost 9 years by that point. And we moved to New Jersey and I had gotten a lot of job offers, but I couldn't even fathom getting back into work at that point in time. I still felt like there's something wrong with me. I would used to stand in the mirror and like just stare at myself and wonder why I couldn't shake this like heavy fog that just encapsulated me. And so I'd always wanted to hike the Appalachian Trail, which is the longest footpath in the world. It goes from Georgia to Maine, and it's 2,200 miles, goes through 14 states. And the first time I actually stepped foot on it was during Ranger School in the mountain phase in Georgia. And I remember walking, we were doing a patrol in the middle of the night with night vision goggles on, and we walk upon, a bunch of tents and some people like campers were sticking their head out and wondering why there's, 30 fully armed rangers like walking around them. It's probably terrifying, actually. And then I looked it up later and I saw, oh yeah, on the map, that's the Appalachian Trail. What is this thing? And so it set in my head as like something I'm going to do in retirement. I like taking big adventures and doing interesting things and challenging myself, of course. So I decided, probably last minute, like a month beforehand, that it was like February it was February 2019. And I decided that I was going to hike the Appalachian Trail starting on March 8th, the day that my friend died 3 years later, in honor of him. And so, and use it as an opportunity to heal and write and get off this track in life that I'd been on, just going and going and going, and actually just change things up for a bit of time. And so my friend's parents gave me his dog tags to carry, and I wore him on the outside of my pack, and started March 8th, the day that he died. And I, started a blog actually it's called Move with a Purpose Life.com. I don't think it's up anymore. I think I've got to renew it, but but it was called Move with a Purpose, which is a saying you hear in the military a lot. They say move with a purpose, like living life with a purpose is yes, how I define it. Mm-hmm. And so I started on that March 8th, and I hiked for 4 straight months. I finally got out of my zone and started, it took me 4 months to go from beginning to end. And I finished on July 8th, and my friend's family joined me on the very last summit in Maine. And it was one of the most beautiful experiences I've ever had. Very powerful emotional experience. And over the course of those 4 months, I started hiking with other veterans and other individuals, and a lot of veterans that were out there on the trail had PTSD. They were they were, EOD, explosive ordnance device guy, the guys that destroy IEDs, and they'd had friends get blown up, right in front of their eyes, and friends get home and take their lives. And, I met friends with significant substance abuse disorders, addiction to alcohol, and they were using the trail as a way to, to get away from alcohol and just have a mission and a purpose, and reinforce the way that they'd like to start living
Can
their
I just
lives.
ask you about that trail? So, I mean, so did you just meet them on the path? Like, how did
Yeah,
were you just like walking?
yeah.
Where did I mean, you camped, right? You were
Carried everything on
camping.
my back. Yeah. So I had a pack with, I like I had a very small packing list, like two socks, two underwear, like two pairs of shirts, maybe a little stick of deodorant, enough food for the 3 or 4 days before like the next town that you get to resupply, maybe a little cooking stove, your sleeping bag, a small packable tent.
So there were
Very
little
basic.
towns that would be reliably
Yeah, there's like
there. I'm just
guidebooks.
curious. Just
Yeah, there'd be
curious.
like there are a
Yeah.
lot of guidebooks, and
Mhm.
stuff like that. So you do a lot of. Sometimes my wife would send packages to towns that I was coming up on, so I could resupply that way, or I would just go to the town and know, all right, it's looking at the map, or it's 100 miles to the next trail town, so that's maybe 4 days of hiking. So I need 4 days of food. So I need 2.5 pounds of food per day. And so that's 10 pounds of food. So, I'd go to the store and grab
Okay.
that, usually hitchhike. It was the first time in my life I would hitchhike, for where the trail would meet a random,
Wow.
like a
Yes.
random street, and just like, and people are in those areas are used to hikers and supporting the hiker culture, which was really cool. But yeah, everybody's going their own pace. So I'd hike with some people for 3 or 4 days. We'd stay at a campsite together, eat dinner together, talk, hike for a couple of days, and maybe I, take a day off and go stay in a hotel for a night and resupply and shower and stuff, and they would
Yeah.
carry on. So you just kind of meet a whole bunch of people over the course. And because, you're so far past the, trivial surface level small talk kind of conversation, like you get to know each other very, very quickly. And it was the first time I really explored vulnerability, like just being deeply vulnerable and open with anybody that I met. It's like, I don't have anything to hide out here. I don't need to pretend to be anything I'm not. I'm just gonna walk along this trail and enjoy sleeping under the stars. And it wasn't, like most of the time it's buggy and muddy and rainy and stormy and freezing and it snowed. It's like
Yeah.
you're really exposed to the elements. But another hard thing to persevere through, right?
Yeah.
Just getting up. I remember getting to like the 75-day mark, the 75-day thing again. Like I remember getting to New Jersey, which is where my wife lived at the time, and it was actually right about my 10-year anniversary when I was hiking by it. So, she picked me up and we went home, and I stayed there for a few nights. And it was so easy in my head to be like, I've already walked like 12, 13, 1,400 miles. Like I already know I could go another 800 miles. I don't want to. I feel like done with this. I'm sick of it. I want to shower every night and sleep in a bed. But it was like, no, no, Josh, you committed to yourself. You're going to hike
Yes.
this whole thing. You're carrying your friend's dog tags on your chest. Like you're
Mhm.
writing about it. Like this is part of pushing through hard times.
Yeah.
So, getting back on the trail, and I still had like another 6 states to 6 states to go to finish. And then I got back out of off the trail, and I got back, started working for an old boss at a new company, and it was maybe 3, 4, 5 months into it. And I'd gone to see the VA for the first time, and actually, because I'd met other friends that were comfortable talking about mental health, I felt comfortable going to talk to the VA about, potentially having PTSD and depression, and they diagnosed me with both, and put me on Wellbutrin, on a antidepressant that I think it started to work and started to help over the course of a few months. But a few months into that new job, it was March of 2020, and the pandemic hit. So things were just starting to level out. And now all of a sudden, my job went fully remote and my wife's job went fully remote, and we're on top of each other, and things are just like not going well. And I start to become hopeless and feel all that negative energy. And I wasn't happy doing what I was doing in my job. And I was like just uncertain of what was next for me in life. And during that time, I started exploring plant medicine for the first time. actually. So I started trying to see if cannabis would help with my anxiety, and it certainly did. And I actually it was illegal in New Jersey at the time, so I learned how to grow it myself, and my wife was not happy,
Mhm.
and and shortly after that, I had a friend mention psychedelics to me. And it was the first time I'd ever really thought about psychedelics, and like drugs have never been part of my life. I mean, I grew up in Denver, and I smoked weed as a kid, right? Like just in high school, but before getting sent away to military school. But before, other than that, like drugs have never been a part of my life, and I didn't even know how to like find them. But I'm a pretty self-reliant person. Before that, I had learned to brew beer while I was still in the army, and it was a big part of my life. I was like a hobby I really enjoyed. And I stopped doing that because I recognized I was drinking too much and didn't have a bunch of army friends as a civilian to come over and drink beer with me. So, I learned how to grow cannabis, and then I learned about psychedelics, and I was in a deep depression at that
I
point in
just want to
time.
say one thing because I don't want to pass it up. You
Yeah.
said I didn't have a bunch of army friends to whatever do that with. And I just wanted to point to like the loss of the brotherhood, right? That it was that
Hmm.
very, I mean, that must have been impactful, like for you. I
Yeah.
know it
No.
was, yeah.
Good. Yeah. Good call out. Going from living in military base after military base and having a bunch of peers and friends, that my wife and I would be friends with all of my friends and
Yeah.
their spouses, and we'd have I used to have brew days where everybody would come over and we would drink one keg of beer, and make it and brew another one, and it was kind of everybody would bring food over, and it was a lot of brotherhood, a ton of camaraderie. And when I got to the military, I really didn't have many friends in the my new town. It took me time. The first people I connected were two other West Point grads who lived in the town, and we started forming friendship. And I recognized that each of us had a lot of healing to do. It was like the first time we were spending time, talking openly and vulnerably with other guys. Yeah, what it's crazy adjusting to this civilian life, and people are
Right.
very different. And so when I got to New Jersey, I really felt alone. I felt very alone, and the pandemic had hit. So it was maybe 1 month into the pandemic, and I decided that I was going to figure out how to grow my own psychedelic mushrooms or psilocybin mushrooms. I had a friend that told me about them, that they're very helpful for mental health, and I was like, "Oh, sure, they're just a party drug or something for hallucinating and tripping at a music festival." And I started reading about it, and it just blew my mind what the research was showing about the efficacy and the potential of psychedelics. And at that point in time, I was really deep in depression. I think the antidepressants were probably helping a little bit, but I knew that I needed something like more powerful if something was available. I didn't want to go to a therapist. I didn't want to like talk to anybody about psychedelics. I just had read like that these have the potential to heal your underlying mental illness as opposed to just curing your symptoms. And I knew
Yeah.
that I didn't want to rely on the curing of symptoms, or
No.
not the reduction of symptoms
Right.
anymore. So I learned how to grow mushrooms at my house, and I grew my first my first batch of them, and it was pretty straightforward, and it was kind of an enjoyable process. And right about the time those mushrooms were finished, my wife told me that she wanted to get a divorce. And this was just after we had about 11 years of marriage, and we had two dogs. We had lost both of our dogs and never had children. Both of our dogs, lived a full life and had just died within the previous 6 months. And it was like I kind of fought against it for a little bit of time. It felt like I was, oh man, and here's something I'm failing at. I'm failing at marriage, and this is not the way my life story is supposed to go. And then all of a sudden, I just recognized that I was, for the first time, being given a gift of freedom. I wasn't owned by the military anymore. I, was in my marriage, which was an institution that, I would, served its purpose. And I loved being married to my wife, and we learned and grew together, but it wasn't serving her, and it wasn't serving me anymore.
Mm.
And the pandemic it was like creating all these unknowns in the world. It was July of 2020. And so we agreed, and my family lives out in the Southwest, and I've been really wanting to move out to the Southwest. And my brother and his family live here in Las Vegas, so I packed up everything I could fit in my car. My wife and I split everything down the middle, and I drove out to Las Vegas with my mushrooms. Yeah,
Okay.
and I told myself that when I get to the
Me and my
first,
mushrooms are
me and my
going to
mushroom, and
Vegas.
we're going to Vegas.
That's it.
Vegas, baby.
Whatever happens in Vegas,
Yeah,
I don't even believe in that
exactly.
concept though, but okay.
No,
The
no, no,
Vegas,
nothing happens in a vacuum.
right, exactly.
So I get to Las Vegas, and it's my very first weekend. And a big part of psychedelics that you hear is set and setting, which means mindset and physical setting. So in order to guarantee the best psychedelic experience, you want to make sure your mindset is in a healthy-ish place, and your physical setting is prepared, and you're not in a party environment, or strangers around you, because you never know how the journey is going to go. So my very first weekend, I get to my house, I move into my condo. I tell myself, as soon as everything's put away this weekend, I'm going to have my first journey. I'd done a lot of reading, and the day came, and I woke up, and I, set my intentions, and wrote out what I wanted for the experience, and kind of set up, like my thoughts about how it was going to go based on, articles I'd read and videos I'd watched. But nothing could have prepared me for the actual experience itself. So I ingested a large amount of mushrooms, more, and I was by myself, or neither of which I'd recommend, especially for
No, don't do with that, people.
your first psychedelic experience. And I will be the first to admit that, based on my history, I have a certain fearlessness to me, and I felt like, if the only thing that I had to kill was, that was gonna be harmed, was my ego, that
Mhm.
was preventing me from being able to really, enjoy life, then so be it.
Mhm.
And so I took that batch of mushrooms, and I felt, within 45 minutes or so, I felt the come up, and it was a completely new sensation for me. I didn't know what to experience, and I felt my mind start to shift, and all of a sudden I was deep in a psychedelic experience.
Mhm.
And during that time, I mean, I revisited every aspect of my life. Like, I felt like I lived and died a million lives, and
Were
I
you
felt
doing that
connected.
intentionally? Like was that an intention to, look at your life during that time?
My intention was to
Hmm.
heal all of the negative emotions that were controlling my mind
Got
at
it.
that time. So I had
Great
such
intention.
yeah, I had such resentment and anger.
Mm.
I had a lot of negativity that fueled me through most of my life. Like, as much as I, tried to be the best leader and everything else I could be, the I think the impetus for me really going down the whole path that I went down was because it was so fueled by resentment and anger toward my parents, toward my biological father, for removing himself from life as our father, and from my parents, for my mom, for like ignoring me through childhood, and my parents for sending me away, and for my wife for wanting to end our marriage, and for
Mm.
my experiences in war, and like, why did I have to go through that, and why is it all those things. And it was all this anger in me, and I hated myself. I like really I didn't recognize how much I did, but I had so much self-loathing, and um I don't think I had respect for myself. I thought, like, that there's something wrong with me. Why am I the way I am? And over the course of, I mean, the psychedelics usually take you where the psychedelics are going to take you, and the best thing you can do is just surrender to the experience, because if you fight it, it's not, you're going to have a challenging experience, which is where you learn a lot from, actually.
Mhm.
But I surrendered to the experience, and it was about a 6-hour journey, and I went through all, like, my mind took me to every major point in my life,
Mhm.
and allowed me to, like, rethink the way that I had chosen my narrative to be, or just fallen into my narrative of my life. So all of a sudden I was able to view my father's suicide as through the lens of compassion and empathy, and instead of, like, intense anger at this man that I really had no memories of, who chose not to be my father anymore, or chose to not be part of our family, and instead, I could now finally see that that was it wasn't a choice that would have been made easily, right? It was like the very last thing you would want to do, right? If you're
Right.
completely hopeless and nothing, your mind really is telling you that this is the only path forward is removing yourself from life. And I was even in that moment, I rephrased. I noticed you said this when you told me about your husband. I used to say committed suicide, and I changed the way that I say it to died by suicide
Yes.
because it's a cause of death, not a criminal offense.
Yeah.
It's devastating.
Yes.
And I taught my family to think that way too,
Can I say
because
one thing? Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah, no,
I,
no, no, no. Go ahead.
what I just because I didn't want I knew you were gonna go on to your experience and I want to hear it, but I just wanted to freeze that. The thing that you just said, which I love about the died by suicide. A friend of mine, Kayla Steckline, she lost her husband and she wrote a book called Fear Gone Wild. And because her husband died by suicide, very, very young. And the and I think I was given an opportunity to feel the feeling of wanting to die. Obviously I didn't do it. And it is literally, it's like the mind has been taken over. It's like you're a completely different person. And it feels as if it actually feels like when the decision's made, it almost feels as if everything feels right. So it's not even really that person that at that moment, and I just I appreciate what you're saying. So I just want people to hear that about suicide as well while you're talking. So I'll let you
Oh, great.
continue.
That was a great. It's a wonderful call out.
Hey, guys, how are you? Isn't that amazing? This story that we're hearing on this show is great. I want to just give a shameless plug of my book. I would really want people to have a good look at my book and to understand what it really is. I used to be ashamed to plug my book. And then I realized, how is that right to keep the information, the 30 years of experience that I have, the 8 years of education, the trauma that I grew out of and learned how to manage and how to manage emotion, all the training I've had in neuroscience and quantum physics. How can I keep that from the public? So it's not, I used to think it was like something I should, be humble about, but being humble is silly when you're keeping things away from people that they need. So what I want to tell you about my book, and I hope that you do get it because I think it will really help you. I've gotten a lot of tremendous feedback about my book and that it's really, really of great value to a lot of people. And what it is, it's an interactive read, and there's inside of it, there's journal entries. So as I'm teaching and going through the book and teaching you how to create the life you want by understanding how you're wired, how your thoughts, feelings, how your words, how thoughts are things and the neuroscience behind it, and how we are programmed from the time we're 0 to 7 years old to live a life of mediocrity or a life of poor design because of meaning that we attached to events when we were children that just became our programming. What I want to tell you is that there is a way out, and it's a simple way. It's very simple. I believe in the simplicity and the grace in healing, and that it doesn't have to be a big work. So I would love it if you'd get my book. It's a best-selling book on Amazon, and it's my first. And I encourage you to get it. It's called The Wake Up Call, an interactive read for building the life you want. I don't think you'll be disappointed. Thanks so much for being on the show, and let's get back to it.
It's so crucial we really don't know what's going on in other people's minds, and we really don't know what torments them and what they're showing you versus what's going on. And a lot of people aren't able to make sense of what's going on in their own minds too, right? I find that I've learned over the last few years that it's okay to be alone even, and the difference between feeling alone versus feeling lonely.
Yes.
And, finding comfort in stillness and, not looking at my phone and just sitting and meditating or just breathing or going for a walk without any technology outside and, really paying attention to the trees and flowers, right? Like just being with myself and comfortable with myself versus wanting to run from those, when it's scary to be alone with your own mind.
Yes. Yeah.
so I recognized I had to even train my mom used to say, oh, when your father committed suicide, or, and she would talk about him with like a vindictiveness that once I every time I heard somebody in my family say, oh, committed suicide, I would say, no, died by suicide. Like
Mm.
it's a devastation, not a crime,
Yes. Hmm.
And I also made peace with my mom and I thought like, oh, I was able to see from her perspective for the first time and say, man, how hard must it have been to send away your child? And she must
Hmm.
have done it from a place, from either a place of desperation or a place where she felt like this was the right thing for me, no matter, despite how hard it was for her. And I made peace with, the experiences I had in war and really difficult leaders that I had and my friend's death. Finally, I was able to tell myself, right, like you see these really devastating things happen, like wars or, random car accidents that kill somebody, right? Something that just shocks. Here in Las Vegas, there was that mass shooting at that country music festival where,
Yes.
I think like 70 people were killed 5 years
Mhm.
ago. And, people went to a concert and didn't come home or were forever scarred by that experience, physically and mentally, from being injured or just the mental anguish from having to go through such a traumatic experience, like really being in a war zone and seeing people killed all
Yes.
around you. So I was fine. Like it didn't make me feel better about my like losing my friend, but it allowed me to put it into a perspective that I don't know if I believe in fate or any aspect of predetermined decision making or anything, but I do believe that every I used to blame myself for my friend's death because he went to Israel, and I was like, oh, if I hadn't exposed him to Judaism and to Israel, he wouldn't have been there at that time, and it's my fault that he's not like that was his life, that was his journey, right? He was exposed to that, and he was made the decisions, and he went to right. It's just life is a series of just decisions or actions that you make one step at a time. And instead of seeing like my life and my friend's life and my family's lives through a lens of victimhood, like
Yeah.
this hard life happened to me, right? Or like, if only this hadn't happened, if only my parents loved me more, if only, then I wouldn't, feel whatever. Instead, right, like came up with that gratitude, right, that I told you earlier, that like I'm grateful for all those challenging
Yes.
experiences. Those I'm not who I am in spite of them. I'm who I am because of them. Right? Like
100%.
that was the big aha moment for me to be able to release all of that anger and that resentment that I had inside of me. And all of a sudden, I felt like real self-love and self-kindness and gratitude, like gratitude for every day and every moment that I had. And I think one of the most important things that I experienced through psychedelics was forgiveness, was
Mm.
like true forgiveness, which I've heard defined one time since then that I really like is like for real forgiveness is accepting the apology you'll never receive,
Yes. Yes.
which I think is really powerful, right?
It is.
I don't need to point like I'm holding myself hostage,
Yep.
from living a quality life if I'm holding poison in my heart toward somebody or something and blaming it for my situation. um, or I'm holding somebody else hostage, like my mom, for like making her feel bad for sending me away, 20 years later instead of trying to understand her. And I came out of that 6 hour experience just feeling honestly, this is why you shouldn't do psychedelics alone, feeling like I wasn't alive anymore. Like I'd taken the red pill in the Matrix and had removed myself from the world as I knew it, like truly, and that everything that I'd experienced was in fact just a projection of my own consciousness. And
Mm.
there was no going back. And I was like, wow, I can't believe, well, I guess it's all over. There was a devastation in it. And I continued to have additional psychedelic journeys with mushrooms, with close friends of mine who had had PTSD or were veterans, with my brother quite a bit actually, and with my mother. So my mom and I started to do take mushrooms together and commit to doing like deep healing work with each other. And once we started doing that, it was like our whole life changed. Like the way we could communicate, the way we could articulate our feelings, the way we could identify the habits that we had and the just reactionary, emotions that we had that were just automatic. And we were able to like pinpoint those in a moment and then change that narrative and continue to like build with each other. So if my mom would say to me something that, that would make me feel, like, why did you say that? Like, can't you understand like that's going to trigger me or something like that? And then I'd like, just have an outburst or just hang up on her or something like that. Instead of doing that, I'd say, Mom, I just recognized when you said that a certain emotion came into me. And I know you didn't intend for that to happen, but this is why I think that made me feel that way. And maybe if you phrase that, this way next time, it'll help me know that you're paying attention to my words and your words and doing a better job of trying to communicate with me when we're interacting. I was like able to really have those conscious level conversations
Yes.
that changed like the entire way that my entire family operated. Like my mom now was able to communicate with my father better. My sister was able to communicate with my mom better. Instead of like feeling like a fragmented family, we started creating a shared culture and identity that wasn't a tragedy based on our origin story, but was a celebration based on how far we've come, and how we could grow and evolve together. And that, so I continued doing that and becoming more and more fascinated with psychedelics and the different kinds of psychedelics. And I started doing a lot of research about it, like the legality of it and whether they were, like how people could access them legally. Like I noticed there's a lot of veteran organizations that would literally have to fly people, veterans with debilitating PTSD out of the country to participate in like plant medicine or mushroom or, ayahuasca experiences and come back healed, like come back, like in a completely better state than they could have ever imagined. And I've learned that like the FDA had granted breakthrough status for the study of MDMA and psilocybin. MDMA, its old street name would be like ecstasy or Molly, and psilocybin is the active ingredient in magic mushrooms. So they were granted phase 3 or breakthrough status in 2017 and are both now in phase 3 trials showing incredible impact to post-traumatic stress disorder, major depressive disorder, substance abuse disorder, anxiety. Marriage assist help, like pretty much everything. And the VA has started to do a ton of research into psychedelics because over 2 million veterans have PTSD or living with PTSD today. And the current form is that you'll go, form of treatment is go talk to a therapist, get on an SSRI. Like if you fail 3 SSRIs, maybe we'll recommend that you go get ketamine therapy, which is the only legal form of psychedelic therapy in the US today. But take MDMA, for instance. MDMA is in phase 3 trials, set to be fully legalized for the treatment of post-traumatic stress disorder this year. In 2024, which is unbelievable. Right. Because what the research shows, and this is going to blow your mind, Alison, if you haven't heard, if you're not familiar with MDMA, the research shows that in the research trials, over 70% of participants, so over 2 out of 3 participants, after 1 to 3 sessions of treatment so that's going in, taking the medicine, sitting with a therapist for like 6 hours for the experience, and having a couple of like follow-up sessions, and doing that up to 3 times, so 3 rounds of that over the course of 18 weeks. 2 out of 3 people, more than 2 out of 3 people, lose their PTSD diagnosis altogether.
I love that.
It's not just saying cure, like reduce your symptoms, but literally lose your diagnosis of PTSD.
I'm thinking of that this is like a way, because we do therapy just a little differently than like other people do it. So what I'm wondering is, it sounds like what's happening in the room with psychedelic treatment is that it's unlocking the person's ability to go to that place, that memory, and reframe it, right? So like one of the things I'll do, and this is not to negate this, because I think it could work in unison. So one of the things that I do is like through the process of helping the person get to whatever that memory is, then we go to the memory actually together, and we are observing it and we go into it. and we talk about that memory, and the person changes it real time, the actual memory changes it, comes out of the memory, and they're like, oh my God, I'm different because it's carried in my body. And now I did something that changed it. But what I'm wondering is, so this is what I'm thinking. Now, I don't know if this is exactly the same thing that you're describing, but it's not the same because it's not assisted, right? So I'm thinking that would be like an intentional thing that, okay, we're doing this for 6 hours, and we're basically going through all of your trauma instead of that, the session. And now this is the trauma that we can see from the patterns of your life. So now we've identified this, and now we're going to go do that, right? But that's not a typical therapy session. I mean, yours, psychedelics isn't obviously a typical therapy session, but what I'm describing isn't, because it's like very intentional to actually not like constantly be a victim and living like one long emotional response, as like Dr. Joe says. Like you can actually change this shit. Like it can go away. You don't have to live in it. You're like it's just a memory stored in your body, like, or a collection of memory. So
that's it.
Is this what you're talking about? Is this the same? I mean, it's not the same, but I mean, is it like, so if let's say I had a client come in here and we were going to do that. Now you're talking about 6 hours, right? This is not an hour, right? You're talking about 6 hours. And then what is the therapist doing? The therapist is assisting them in that memory, right?
Yeah. So it's a really, really great setup for understanding what psychedelic assisted therapy is actually like.
Yeah.
And it takes different forms. So like ketamine therapy, you would go into a clinic and you could get a IM injection or an IV injection, or sometimes even like a lozenge, or nasal spray, and you're put into a chair, and you're usually given a face mask and headphones with a predetermined playlist on it that kind of guides your thoughts through different, emotional, peaks and valleys. But as a whole, you're not actually interacting much with a therapist at all during the session. Yeah. What's happening is the medicine does what the medicine's pretty effective on its own, but it's most effective and should be done with a facilitator, and then most importantly with somebody to help you integrate the experience after the fact, right? It's like the difference between going, like, you can go on a crash diet and do that for 30 days and lose a bunch of weight, and then just go right back to your old way of life without incorporating, new ways of nutrition into your health, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's kind of, it's similar to that. So what the medicine is doing is it's putting you into a very neuroplastic state that is reopening these critical learning periods in your life that are that were like when your psyche was really like developed. Like maybe one day your mom called you fat and it sat with you subconsciously, and then you develop an eating disorder, and that controls your mind for the rest of your life or for decades.
I am going crazy right now with what you're saying. I know why I met you. This is crazy. I know I'm crazy. Interrupting. 0 to 7 years, you know this, 0 to 7 years old, we're in a theta brainwave, a hypnotic state. All of that shit is stored inside and dictating everything. So you're talking about that this creates this neuroplasticity that allows, I guess, quicker access, right? To all of the,
like
is that
immediate,
what that is?
Yeah, immediate? Like it puts immediate access, pretty immediate access, essentially. You, like, there's no question. This is why it's hard to do psychedelic studies too, clinical trials, because you can't do it. It's impossible to do a double-blind study like when you're on the medicine, and if if you got the placebo, right? Like, right, your mind go like there's some physiological feelings, but you get these really intense, like, things just make sense in your head. So you could go back to your mom. Oh yeah, I remember when my mom said that to me, and after that is when I started like being self-conscious about what I was eating, and I would go to lunch and I'd like just just
Yes.
pretend I was eating or whatever, or skip lunch altogether, right? Like you can see how that manifests throughout life, and that you kind of solidify. You created those barnacles over that period, that way that you're
Yes.
thinking, and you can't shake those off.
What
So
about that
what
unlocked memory, like from somebody who's really been traumatized that then they're like it does it mimic in any way like a PTSD like experience, almost like you're in the moment, like, where somebody maybe could become dangerous or, I don't know. I want anything that can make people, I want to do what works, what makes people better and
mm,
makes people right. So, like, I guess anybody can abuse anything really and make it not good. But I don't
yeah,
know. What are your
to
thoughts
so
on that?
so first, I want to comment on the cannabis piece, and I want to comment on psychedelics versus what I would consider hard drugs. So first
Right.
on the second piece,
Right.
I don't disagree with you that it's not a helpful drug for everybody or for everything, and it does have the potential to be abused or used without benefit. Um,
Yeah.
but I'm still surprised that it's less legal than alcohol.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's such a whole political, that's a whole thing. But
Lobbyists and
let me ask you,
yeah,
because we're gonna
economics.
have to wrap up.
Yeah,
I wanted, where can anyone, everyone find you? And if they want to use your company or, you know, uh, tell us, do you know the name of your book yet, or you haven't named it?
I haven't named the book yet. I have some ideas, but I don't want to throw them
No,
out
that's
there
okay. Don't do
until I
that.
really
Yeah.
know. But yeah, so my mom and I are writing a book on using psychedelics to heal multi-generational trauma, which has been a
Cool.
huge part of our journey together.
Yes.
And I think, it's like a big part of my journey is helping veterans and individuals trauma.
Yes.
But I think a huge, like maybe even a bigger calling for me is helping families heal that generational trauma that's passed down, and like learning how to be the one that ends that
Yes.
pattern,
The
right? Like that
Pilgrim.
you can wake up and you can end the pattern, right?
Yes.
And then but it takes intention and it takes effort and it's work. But so that's the book that we're writing. Hopefully we'll have it
Love
out by the
that.
end of this year.
Yes.
Yeah, it'll be my first
Yeah.
first book that we're writing, but it's I've also been able to get really close with my mom and learn a lot of new things about it. So we're going to kind of parallel her experiences with my experiences and show it from different perspectives. But the business is called the Psychedelic Exchange, and we're at psychex.com, like Psyche, Psyche, the letter
Mhm.
X.com. You can follow me at the Josh Halu, which is my name, at Instagram, or my company at Psychedelic Exchange. And we're pretty active on there, sharing information about psychedelics and information about psychedelic therapy. Our company currently, we're creating a network of legal ketamine clinics and kind of creating the setting the stage for legal MDMA clinics in the near future.
What do you
And
do?
then
How do you do you guide them how to set up? Like, what do you do? What do
so
you
in the
do
long term,
exactly, Josh?
in the long term, yes,
Yes.
that is the goal, is to create like best practices
Yeah.
and the ability for clinics to operate, effectively. In what we currently do is we bring clinics onto our platform, which is kind of a marketing customer relationship management platform that helps clinics uh, improve their visibility online, improve their branding and marketing, set up their Facebook pages and how they're doing their advertisements and how they're finding patients essentially and attracting patients to them. And then on a patient side, we're listing out the clinics that we've added into our platform or that are doing doing work the way that we to the standards that we expect them to be performing these services. And then they're able to be found or searched for when an individual comes to our website and is looking for information or a clinic itself to pursue therapy. So we're two sides of the coin. On the clinic side, we're helping clinics with their marketing, with their online visibility, with their ability to manage patients, and then eventually we also have some future future capabilities coming to help with clinics, managing their practice itself, so they can run, to perform therapy as effectively as possible, as efficiently as possible, and be found by patients. And on the patient side, we're helping them find the clinics and also educating them around what psychedelics are, what psychedelic therapy is, what the different medicines are, and then the next phase is we want to create a community where individuals can actually interact with each other. And we're doing a lot of education and awareness currently. So we just hosted a webinar last week for veterans in mental health with psychedelic treatment. So just doing my part. It took me a long time to come out of the psychedelic closet, as they say, and just doing my part to really use my story and use my journey to destigmatize these medicines in a responsible way, and help pave the way for much wider societal healing. It starts with that individual work, that the deep work that I think we all have to do.
Yeah. We're never going to stop talking, because I'm going to say another thing. I could just got to stop talking, but we do have to go. But one of the plans is to make part of this practice called CJ's House. It's my late husband's name, and for veterans to get higher level care than what they're getting like at the VA and stuff. So so that's like part of it. So places that are already established and don't have to, I guess you're just talking about, you would establish them in terms of that kind of work, right? Is that what you mean? Because adding in the psychedelic capability into their practice. Got it. Okay, so this has got to be a wrap. So I want to thank you so much for spending basically the afternoon with me, because that's what just happened. It was just such a pleasure to get to know you. You're so smart. You have so much to offer. And the way that you've moved through what you've been through in your life is just really inspirational. And I appreciate it. I appreciate your time. And I just want to thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, and for what you're doing for the mental health space. Truly, Alison, I love your message. I think it's so important that we all wake up and start living life to the fullest. And it really does start with that deep personal self-healing and committing to the journey, and knowing that it's not an easy journey, but it's most certainly a worthwhile journey to go on. And sometimes that's what's going to enable you to just really start feeling fully alive for the first time.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It is a wrap.
Guys, thank you so much for listening to the show. I just want to say to you that we are all together a part of the Mission Awake, a mission that's going to stop the mediocrity that's plaguing all of us. So if you got something here today, I ask that you would be a part of this mission and you'd share it with whoever you can. Take a screenshot of the show and share it on your Instagram. If you are looking for me, you can find me on social media platform Instagram, Alison Answers, or Lager Counseling Services. And give us a review and subscribe, if you could, to YouTube, Alison Answers. That's where you're going to get a lot of content. I drop stuff every day, goofy stuff, all different kinds of stuff. 5-minute videos that just get you moving in your day. Have a great week. See you next time.